escape forever. I mean, you've probably heard already on the show this week that Brisbane was once regarded a sleepy town, and then suddenly it was 6 months of entertainment, day and night. The river stage, the Piazza, the walkways, the aquacade. There were multiple acts happening all the time. So how do you coordinate such a huge event? Where do you even begin? Well, Barbara Absolon was the Deputy Entertainment Director of the entire Expo entertainment program, as well as the producer for Walkway Entertainment.
Barbara, hi.
Barbara, so sorry, pardon it. And we've also got with you this afternoon David Hamilton, who was the producer for the Piazza Entertainment. David, good afternoon.
Great to be here.
Great to have you both here. And I'd like to start at the beginning, if you don't mind. Barbara, were you on board from the beginning?
From the beginning, Expo had appointed Rick Birch as the Director of Entertainment, and it was his Australian and international experience that made them realise that you really needed someone with a worldview for this sort of thing. And then David and I were, I think, among the first couple of people that Rick spoke with, and I began, I think it was May 1985, so 3 years out from the Expo.
Was that enough time to get everything organised?
Well, it had to be.
You didn't have a choice.
Yeah, exactly.
The gates were going to open April 30, come rain, hail or shine.
And just on the point that you were saying before about where do you start, I mean, that was the panic moment for all of us, I think, and I think it was the first time that I'd ever heard that saying about how do you eat an elephant, a bite at a time. So that's, I think, what we all did. We just had to take a bite of that elephant every day.
And how did the entertainment program, the concept, come about? Did you go into it with some ideas of what you would like to achieve? Was it collaborative? How did you put the plan together?
Well, Rick had put together a proposal, which was fairly thorough, but of course it was developed constantly throughout the 3 years of preparation. Some of those initial ideas stayed and lived on, and you might have read about his infamous pink submarines, which was just an off-the-cuff thing when the media were interviewing him. And it's like, well, we could have pink submarines, and then you had to make it happen. So he was a terrific experience and really the creative brains to start with. And then I think he appointed the right people and then allowed them to use their creativity throughout those 3 years in developing a whole raft of other things.
Now, David, I suppose that's where you come in. You were given the task of programming for the Piazza. What was your brief?
I was given a brief by Rick Birch to put every kind of form of entertainment you could think of, because it had a 15 metre by 15 metre sprung wooden floor, and also was about a 30 by 40 metre performance space, and sat about 5,000 people when it was at capacity, which it was most of the time. And there was 10 shows a day every day for 6 months, and we had everything from 3 of the most spectacular Chinese acrobatic troupes here. We had Circus Oz, we had trapeze acts, we had BMX. We started the trend towards ballroom dancing, which was one of the most popular
of course,
things
this is all ahead of Baz Luhrmann's Red Curtain series.
Yeah,
so you were ahead of the game.
After that, Strictly Ballroom got made, actually, and it was all prior to all that. So, and then we would, on a Friday night, he asked me to put a wood chop in, so it was a way of revitalising and theming.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, it was the same idea. After Expo, we were, well, as Rick said, there's 25,000 performances in 6 months. He wanted everything to be presented in a new way because it was leisure in the age of technology, and we also had the most spectacular lights and sound, the best that money could buy. It was all brand new and all the latest technology. So not only did we have all the diversity of acts, but we also had them presented with the best sound and lighting that you could possibly ask for.
How did you even manage to find the right talent? I mean, I think it's extraordinary. You look at some of the reality television shows that focus on singing, for instance, and they used to back in the day when Australian Idol kicked off, for instance. Part of the show would be the auditions process. And in this day and age, if you want to look at new talent available, it's very easy to go to YouTube or Facebook. A quick Google search will turn up all manner of possible acts. But what was the audition process like for 88, given that you started, in in earnest in 86, 87?
Well, I was with Barbara on the think tank. Then I was a bit busy for a while with other things, and then I started in the beginning of 87. But prior to that, a lot of people had sent in videos from around the world and around Australia. But at that stage, as Barbara will tell you, we had no street entertainment, did not exist in this country. So we had trouble. We did national auditions, and then producers had to then find a way of presenting them in a new way. And when we did get international artists who were developed, we then had written in their contracts that they would also then do workshops, so that there was a benefit for Australian performers. So, but every Tuesday, I think it was, Barbara, wasn't it? We were in a little room with all the producers, and we would have to rate all these audition tapes that got sent in on VHS tapes. Really raw they were, not produced like they are today.
Wow. What happened to them?
I've still got some
Have
of them.
you really?
I'm not surprised.
Oh my goodness!
There was one very good audition tape that no one ever got to see. Well, we did. A little company was going to come here for the opening 2 weeks that no one knew of, and then they became an international success overnight, and that company was Cirque du Soleil.
I got a circus tape for you. They're a little edgy and crazy. They're Canadian, and lo and behold, oh my goodness!
Yes.
They were all set to perform at the Piazza.
For the opening 2 weeks, and then they became a success. And also Australian Equity caused a few, not problems, but there was a...
Problems.
There was a few ratio
It's
problems.
done now. Barbara's letting it all hang
Yes,
out.
exactly.
Because, I mean, on the circus front, Circus Oz really was a standout feature of Expo, and that really catapulted their reputation as a touring group. And it doesn't end there. You had, as you mentioned, the Axe Attack, but then you had other local superstars who you were working with. Simon Gallagher had a show there. The BMX you mentioned. So what was it like working with international organisations? Language barriers, I suppose, travel barriers. Did you have to go far afield to find the right acts, the right performers, the right entertainers? What was that process like?
Well, in truth, even a step back from that, as David just mentioned, one of our very early problems was actors' equity, saying you have to hire all Australian performers.
Really? They wanted everyone 100% Australian?
And
Wow.
we had to try to convince them that the best thing that could happen for Australian performers was for us to bring in all of this international talent and the legacy that they would leave, that they would train up Australians, etc., etc. That was, I think one of the great achievements of Expo, in that it just broadened the experience and the imaginations of a lot of Australians who've gone on to make careers out of their craft since then.
You're on ABC Radio Brisbane. You're listening to Barbara Absolon, who was the Deputy Entertainment Director of the entire Expo Entertainment program, as well as David Hamilton, who was the producer for the Piazza Entertainment. We are talking about entertainment at Expo 88. It was an extraordinary 6 months of celebration of music, of dance, of performance, circus, and so on. I'm really interested to hear from you, though, in as much as you had to consider the Australianness of the talent that you were booking. What was the conversation back in 1986, 85 about Indigenous art and Indigenous performance? Because we've just had the Commonwealth Games, and Indigenous Australian culture and art and music and song was a huge focus of the opening and the closing ceremony. Was that conversation happening back in the mid-80s?
Look, not to anywhere near the degree it is now. And to be honest with you, the Indigenous performing groups were almost non-existent. And I think David would agree that the quality was far less than it is now. But we did have Indigenous groups performing, and once again, they were given the same lessons in professionality and developing their craft as well. But anyone who was around in the 80s would know that there wasn't anywhere near the same emphasis on Indigenous traditions and arts.
David, from a musical perspective as well, what was that like when it came to programming the Piazza?
Very similar, yes. Although John Watson, who was in charge of the River Stage, he was in charge of all the rock and roll as well as all the international big name acts, and then he was given the position as National Day producer. So every country that was here was then represented by their Prime Minister or their President, and also their cultural performances were always given as part of their National Day, weren't they, Barbara? So they were represented to a 10, 15,000 people audience on the River Stage as part of their National Days, and sometimes it crossed over to the amphitheatre or the Piazza, and then of course the walkways then featured whatever performance. It was just so busy, and there was people forget that there was 40 on our smallest day. I think there was 40 or 50,000 people. On our largest day, there was about 180 or 90,000.
Oh, extraordinary!
People have no idea what type of crowds that went through. I think at that stage in 88, I think it was 14 million visitations, which was the population of Australia roughly at the time or something, I think. Yeah.
It really goes to show, doesn't it, the extraordinary event that it was, the hard work that went into it. I'm sure you both slept long and hard at the conclusion of Expo 88. But it was an opening up of hearts and minds and ears to different things, different ideas from an entertainment perspective especially. You mentioned the River Stage, David, which doesn't exist anymore in the form that it took at Expo. It was just near where the ferry terminals are today, I understand, and the Piazza that you were programming isn't the Piazza that we have at South Bank. It was a different Piazza, but still, this was the beginning of a musical legacy, an entertainment legacy for Brisbane. When you walk around this city, do you see the connection between the work that you did in 88 and, I guess, the cultural capital that I enjoy now as someone who was born 87, wasn't there in the beginning, but now would regard Brisbane as a bit of a destination for culture and the arts? I mean, I feel like you had a key part to play in that. David, Barbara, do you feel like you were instrumental? What are you most proud of?
Oh, well, look, I agree. I think that from Expo, the audience expected more than they'd ever had before, and the performers realised that they could do more than they had ever done before, and in a different way. And I think in changing the expectations of the population is a great thing to achieve, because that doesn't go back. That stays, and then it keeps stepping forward.
The entertainment, we ended up bringing a higher level than what Australia had ever seen before. And we've always said after that, everyone had to lift their game. And they did. Dreamworld, SeaWorld, everywhere. Warana, the Eka, all the show societies had to all of a suddenly now had, what people had accepted before. No longer they'd been exposed to such a wonderful level of professionalism, entertainment-wise, and on such a huge scale. And also Brisbane was grew up after Expo, because no one dined out in the streets until they dined at all the wonderful eating places that were discovered at Expo as well.
I was catching up with one of our ABC News cameramen this morning who worked for Channel 10 at the time, in the little fishbowl, they called it. They had a studio down here, and would say that, well, it was a bit of a toss-up because you had the Munich Beer Pavilion and you also had the pub attached to the British Pavilion, but it was the Canadians and their Long Island iced tea that they found particular favour with. Truly an extraordinary time. We've heard from people who feel that a lot's been lost from Expo, that some of the art that was created maybe wasn't preserved in the way it should have been. Do you think that the contributions that you made, the entertainment that you provided, and the legacy of that has been honoured appropriately?
I was just saying to Barbara before we came in here that really it's 30 years ago, and the amazing entertainment and what happened after Expo was just amazing nationally. But I look now at what's presented around the country, and if anything, we've gone backwards. It's sad. It's really sad that there's a lot of people struggling for work, and yet after that there was so much work, because there was entertainment everywhere, at all the festivals, at all the theme parks and everything. And what made Expo, and I think Rick wanted it, and so did Barb and all of us, was live entertainment, wasn't it? It was the human factor, wasn't it?
Exactly. And really, in relation to the artworks that have gone, it's a shame that some of them aren't around, but you can't be too nostalgic about things. You've got to move on with your life. But I do agree with David. There was a period after Expo where live entertainment was happening in all sorts of places that it hadn't happened before. And then all of a sudden, it relies on the budgets of the venues and artists maybe compromising and various things like that. And it is a shame. I don't think there's anywhere near enough live music and entertainment and performance that there might be, and probably not as much as there was post-Expo. But that's not something that's something that the private sector's got to address, really.
$600 million budget, I think Expo had. Was it the biggest budget that you'd ever worked with?
Well, the entertainment budget we were talking was 1.4 million for the opening ceremony, wasn't it? And I know my budget was 2 million for the Piazza with the circus, and then the entertainment for the whole 6 months was 45 or 50 million.
Well, the proposal that Rick put in had it as an $8 million budget. But even the word entertainment back then was used in a completely different context. I distinctly remember hearing about one of the board members saying that's a lot of lunches. But it went up to around about 45 million, and that was because management and everyone kept being convinced that this was what was required. The pavilions were the core of Expo, but people needed to be entertained while they were waiting and in between going to the pavilions, and of course to draw them back, so that it was a constantly changing picture at Expo. So, money well spent.
Oh, I think so. Here. Look, it's a party that I regrettably missed out on, and hopefully we'll see something along the same lines hit Brisbane again in my lifetime. I will cross my fingers and toes. Maybe you guys should knock heads and we should put the hat around and see what we can get together at our outside broadcast on Monday. Be able to scrape together a few coins. We'll see how far that goes. But look, thank you very much for coming along this afternoon. David Hamilton, it's been a pleasure getting to know you and having a chat. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And Barbara Absolon, thank you so much for your time.
Nice to be here.
Barbara Absolon was the Deputy Entertainment Director of the entire Expo 88 entertainment program, and David Hamilton